When I visited this street 4 or 5 years ago, I remember having to scramble across dodging cars the whole way just to get down to the beach. 2 years ago, this street was full of orange cones down the middle of it. During COVID, those cones were placed there to push car traffic to one side so that there was more space for people to ride their bikes and to walk. But today, as you can see, all of that is different. Hey everyone, I'm Tom and this is Shifter, a channel about urban cycling, bike commuting, and the ways we get around our cities. And I'm mostly a patient and optimistic kind of guy, but one thing about the potential and the opportunity of cycling often comes down to one word: pace. A lot of cities, including Vancouver, where I am right now, have made a lot of great strides in cycling, but the pace of change
is slow.
Okay, I want to show you something. This may be a bit meandering, but stick with me. There was this paper published a few years ago in the Michigan Law Review called The Procedural Fetish. Are you still with me? Don't leave. The author, a guy named Nick Bagley, argues that administrative law, or the legal rules that we put in place to ensure that government projects have, quote, public accountability and prevent factional interest from capturing agencies, have gotten to the point where they're doing the opposite of what they were intended. In essence, what he's saying is we've put so many rules on government to ensure that we don't waste taxpayer money and we don't run roughshod over people and private interests don't take over projects, that it makes it really difficult for governments to build stuff. And he blames both liberals and conservatives for this situation. We're living in an era where we need to meet our climate change targets by building solar fields and more walkable neighborhoods, but because of this procedural fetish, it feels like we can't even get a bike lane built. But rather than wallow in what we can't do, I'm in Vancouver right now, so I thought I'd take you for a little tour of what may be one little way that we can move forward in this situation we've gotten ourselves into. Let's go for a ride. So I'm in Burnaby, a community just outside of Vancouver. This is part of the Central Valley Greenway, which is a 25-kilometer cycling pedestrian route that goes out to the suburbs and all the way into downtown Vancouver. And it's pretty good, but as it came through this industrial area, what, you thought Vancouver was all orcas and oceanfront property? As the Greenview passed through this industrial area, it wasn't great. It was pretty narrow, there were a lot of trucks turning in and out, and it wasn't great for anybody. But when it came to improving this area, rather than setting up 3 years of public engagements or kicking it down to another organization to deal with it, the city tried something different. Instead, what the city did was they got to work using some cheap materials like these plastic bollards and those movable concrete barriers. They quickly put the bike lane in, laid some paint down, and that was that. But that was not actually that, so I don't know why I said that. What they did afterwards is then start the engagement process. Once the lane was in here, then they went to all the neighbors, talked to people, asked the usual questions, and they didn't just sit on that info, they actually took it to heart and made some tweaks. They adjusted some parking, they improved some sight lines. They generally just made it better based on the feedback they got. And now what the city is saying is that when the budget cycle renews and they've got money to make this permanent, they will replace these cheap materials with proper permanent infrastructure. This is not perfect, but what's interesting about it is that it got done. It took months instead of years. Okay, here's another bike lane that is in a different municipality. This is North Vancouver, and there were long plans to put a bike lane here, but it was never in the budget, so it never got built. But then somebody somewhere in City Hall realized this street was scheduled for resurfacing, and so they saw an opportunity. And rather than start a long engagement process, they pulled out some planter boxes, some of those cheap movable curbs, and again, they went to work and put this bike lane in a couple of weeks. Once that was in, again, they took some feedback from residents and made some adjustments, and here we are in a couple of months with a functioning bike lane instead of what could have been years of engagement. Both of those bike lanes I just showed you are examples of what is sometimes called rapid implementation or quick build bike lanes. I stole both those examples from a recent report from TransLink, the Vancouver Transportation Authority, which was touting the benefits of rapid implementation, and used those examples to make its point. And the point they were trying to make is that this is a quick way to get things done. They can be done quite affordably especially relative to other road projects. But I think the important part of all of this isn't just that they go in and that they're cheap, but also that they are open to feedback. I think that is the key element here. This also reminded me of one of the points that Katie Rhoda from the London Cycling Campaign mentioned when I was there a few months ago about pilot projects where the Transportation Authority there was putting in bike lanes on a trial basis. They would sort of put them in quickly, assess them over a couple of months for feedback, tweak the design, and perfect it. And in some cases, remove it. And I think that removing it is an important part too. Like if these are to work, then citizens have to be convinced that they're being listened to. And if they are a complete disaster, take them out. That's fine. Not every bike lane that goes in is going to be great. And it's hard to overstate how important that feedback is that citizens can provide. I think one of the big concerns with the current engagement process in a lot of cities is that citizens go to these things and it feels like the plan is already complete and they feel like no matter what they say, nothing's going to change anyway because the decision has already been made. These rapid implementation projects get around that by actually listening and adjusting based on feedback. I think another thing about the engagement process is that a lot of people, including me, are pretty terrible at assessing projects on paper. I always find that a project in real life feels much different than it did on paper. And another part is that we see this over and over again with bike lane projects, is that motorists tend to overreact when they're in the planning stage. This happens all the time, but people get upset, motorists get upset, the bike lane's open, motorists realize it's not the end of the world, things calm down again afterwards too. These rapid implementation projects also get around that a little bit by letting people see them in the real world, and therefore their reactions are probably a bit more realistic than just the concept. And of those two bike lanes, I wouldn't say either of them are perfect, but perfection is not the point. The point is they got things done. They moved ahead quickly. And in today's world, I think that can count as a victory. So back here on Beach Drive, where I started this video, the lane that exists today is much different even than what was put in during COVID. The design was examined and tweaked and changed to accommodate snowplows, and traffic patterns were put back into place. So is it perfect? Probably not. But what's most important maybe is that it got done. Thanks for watching. See you next time.